Is it still good morning, everyone? Yes. It was really nice to be here. In case you don't know who I am, my name is Ruth Darlington. I'm a member of Medford Meeting in Medford, New Jersey, where I helped start our climate change group. And I'm on the Eco-Justice Collaborative of Philadelphia Yearly Meeting, which is a group that tries to support one another's environmental sustainability justice projects and also support the larger community in that kind of work. And I was appointed as one of the climate witness stewards when the Philadelphia Yearly Meeting adopted a climate witness. And so my role there is to support the work throughout the yearly meeting as much as we possibly can. And it's a wonderful group to be a part of. I'm also a representative to Quaker Earth Care Witness, which is the national Quaker organization that supports Friends in making the connection between their spiritual journey and honoring the earth and all of life. So today I'm here to talk about reducing food waste, thanks to Shoshana and Lisa and others who invited me. Thank you very much. I love being here with you. I love your meeting house. And it was a long drive, but it was worth it. This is a really good time to be talking about food waste because a lot of food waste happens over the winter holidays where we all seem to celebrate with food and probably more food than usual. But before I go into that, I just want to mention that I consider myself a climate activist because I don't think the changes that we as individuals make are enough. I think we have to enact policies that reduce emissions and support renewable energy that's affordable for everybody. And we have to do that soon if we're going to make a real difference. But food waste and eating less meat and dairy are two personal choices that we can make and actions we can take that do make a difference in reducing greenhouse gases. Because in my mind, reducing emissions is what it's all about. And doing it justly so that everybody benefits and nobody bears the brunt of those changes is all a part of it. So why food waste? There are three numbers that I kind of turn back to. One is 1/3. One is 1/2. And one is 40%. So the 1/3, the World Resources Institute says that about 1/3 of the weight of all the food produced in the world is wasted before it gets to our table or at our table. It would be, if food waste were a country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases after the United States and China. That's good news because it means if we stop wasting it, we can make a big difference. The second number is 1/2. About half the food wasted in this country, this may not be true for the rest of the world, is wasted during what they call the consumption stage. So that means either food services or in our own homes. And most of that ends up in landfills where it creates methane because food in landfills is not composted, but instead it just rots. And I'm sure most of you know that methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. And in our country, landfills are the third largest source of methane emissions. So again, we can do something to improve that situation. The third number is 40%, and this is one I really like because up to 40% of the food waste in this country has been attributed specifically to our households. That means we, as individuals, by cutting down on food waste in our homes, can make a huge difference. And when we do that, we can save money because according to the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, Americans throw out more than 400 pounds of food per person annually. And in an average family of 4, that comes to wasting about $1,800 a year. So it's good to talk about food waste at the holidays because that's when we waste a lot more food. But it would be nice to have that $800 during the holidays too. Not that you're going to have it all at once. So I want to show you, you don't have to take my word for it, I want to show you this video. This was part of a series that NPR put on called Waste Not, Want Not during the pandemic. So you'll see some of the references are to the pandemic, but the information is still relevant and it's still current. So Lisa.
On a day when families across the country gather for a Thanksgiving meal, it's worth noting that over the next 12 months, the average American household of 4 will spend roughly $1,800 on food they never eat. Special correspondent Allison Aubrey of NPR talks to scientist and cookbook author Dana Gunders about why Americans waste so much in the kitchen. And she gets some lessons on how to cut those losses. It's the latest in our special series on food waste.
Celebrity chefs share tricks of the trade.
So there's no waste in there.
How to waste less in the kitchen. It's part of a 20-city tour underway the James Beard Foundation kicked off here in New York City.
One of our key priorities is the reduction of food waste.
Do you like the dish?
Esther Choi is chef and owner of Mok Bar, a Korean restaurant in Brooklyn. Tonight, she serves up a traditional Korean rice dish she calls Buddha Bibimbap.
So all the vegetables are dehydrated. They'll last like a year. So it's a great way to not waste like extra vegetables.
And what's the easiest way to do that?
If you just turn on your oven at like 150 to 200 degrees and leave the vegetables overnight, then they'll dry up.
Teaching people how to do this at home is the goal.
So what I have here are some herbs that would normally be wasted.
The foundation has launched a social media blitz with chefs online and Instagram cooking up waste-free recipes. And the Beard Foundation is not alone in its efforts.
We waste 50% more food today than we did in the 1970s.
Dana Gunders, who authored a report in 2012 quantifying just how much food goes to waste, says there's a reason why consumers need to be part of the conversation.
We in our homes actually make up the biggest source of all the food that is going to waste.
43% of the food that Americans waste each year comes from what we toss at home. That's double the 18% that restaurants waste and the 16% that grocery stores throw out. All told, America's food waste bill adds up to $218 billion. According to the USDA, this would be akin to filling the Willis Tower in Chicago about 44 times. When food rots, it releases methane gas. And climate change experts estimate that food waste is responsible for up to 10% of greenhouse gas emissions. So according to many scientists, reducing it is one of the most effective things each of us can do. Changing the way we shop and cook can make a difference.
Beets, if you buy them in a bunch, you can actually use those beet greens, cut them up and saute them.
Here's Gunders at Google's headquarters, sharing some hacks with employees at lunchtime. She advises corporations and grocery chains on strategies to manage food waste. And she's also written the Waste-Free Kitchen Handbook. It's full of ways to repurpose food you might have thrown out. She joins us in the kitchen to show us one of her favorite food waste kitchen hacks.
You know, one of the things I hate wasting the most are avocados.
Ah, look at that. It's really gooey and dark. You're not going to eat this, are you?
It's totally fine to eat. The browning is just from enzymes in the fruit. So what I like to do is use it in a chocolate mousse.
Ooh, that sounds good.
The cocoa really covers that up. Take your avocados, stick them in a food processor.
Then we added 5 other simple ingredients: cocoa powder, milk, vanilla, salt, and maple syrup.
So it is going to taste like dessert.
It will, I promise.
Gunder says a large part of the food waste problem here in the U.S. is cultural.
If I walk down the street today and throw some food on the ground, people would think I'm crazy. But if I throw that same food in the garbage can, people would not think much of it. And I think that signals the cultural acceptability we have right now for food going to waste.
She points to Great Britain as an example of a country that has put a dent in the cultural acceptance of food waste.
50% of food waste in the country comes from the house, so we have a huge responsibility to kind of curb the waste culture.
The British are spending millions on a decades-long national campaign called Love Food, Hate Waste. Events to raise awareness showcase chefs that cook up leftovers at public events throughout the UK. And the result? Consumer food waste fell by 18% in Great Britain between 2007 and 2015.
It's created a culture where the cool thing to do, the right thing to do, the expected thing to do for businesses is to reduce their own waste and help their consumers reduce waste as well.
Here in the U.S., 3 federal agencies have set strategies to help tackle food waste, including new efforts to measure and track the problem. And at the end of 2018, Congress allocated almost $30 million for grants to states to bolster composting and food waste recovery programs. Gunder says all this is good, and given how much we waste in our own kitchens, a cultural shift in our attitudes and in our habits is important too.
It's really difficult to change policy and have that change culture. But when you look at campaigns like seatbelts,
safety belts for dummies or people,
or littering, or Smokey the Bear,
having a campfire means we have to be responsible.
There is a way for the federal government to support a cultural shift through large campaigns around the country. And we have not seen them support a campaign around reducing food waste yet. And voila!
All right, looks like chocolate mousse.
You ready to try some?
Absolutely. It does not taste avocado at all. It almost tastes like buttery or creamy.
What's amazing is the avocado actually takes the place of the butter and cream, and so it's much healthier for you.
I'm Allison Aubrey of NPR News, cooking for the PBS NewsHour in San Francisco.
Thank you, Lisa. So I can tell you the avocado chocolate mousse is delicious. I've made it a couple of times because as a vegetarian, I do eat a lot of avocados, and every once in a while they get away from me, and that's a good thing. It's more like a chocolate pudding, really. I think mousse is not the right word. I was listening to an interview with Rebecca Solnit. Do you all know who Rebecca Solnit is? She's an author, but she's also a climate activist. She's been an activist in lots of areas, but I heard her recently say, like, feminism is my life, but climate is my work. And she was talking about the word encourage. And she said, really, somebody had reminded her it means to instill courage in someone. And that's what I feel like we need right now, because for some of us, like me, I love to cook, so trying to cut back on food waste by doing something fun, like making, avocado chocolate mousse, I enjoy that, but that's not for everybody. The real reason we do this is because people rely on us. There are people right now whose lives are being impacted by climate change. And so while we could say, it's no big deal. My life isn't going to change that much one way or another. When we choose not to take action, when we choose not to be a part of the solution, we're really saying they don't matter. And that just doesn't fit with my Quaker principles at all. So it's clear, if we want to reduce greenhouse gases and save money by reducing food waste, we can do it. You probably don't think you waste 400 pounds of food a year in your household per person. I sure don't think I do, but I'm probably wrong, even though I try really hard. So what I have here is a way to test how much food we waste in our households. It's called a food waste audit, and you only do it for a week. You put whatever food you throw away here, and you put how much here. I usually do it like a half a cup or whatever, but some people do it by weight. Then you tell where you put it: compost bin, garbage disposal, and trash can. And there's a reason they're in that order, because compost is the most sustainable way to throw your food away. At least it doesn't end up putting methane in the atmosphere. And
how does composting not put methane in the atmosphere?
Because compost doesn't, food doesn't rot in a compost pile, it decomposes.
Aerobic versus anaerobic.
Yes.
The help of bugs.
Sometimes. Well, yeah, always. Yeah. Maybe not bugs that we see, but microbes for sure.
But why doesn't that happen in a landfill? Just because?
Because there's not enough oxygen.
That's why you turn your compost bin.
But even if you don't turn your compost bin, I can attest that it will still compost rather than rot. My compost pile has never smelled bad, and I turn it maybe once a year.
Because you're putting the leaves and the grass and everything else in there with it. That helps.
with some of its size, but like landfills are made to not have circulation. They're meant to keep water out, to keep stuff. So it's meant to be an anaerobic environment.
Yeah.
They're lined.
Yeah, I'm just.
Yeah.
It's a matter of scale.
Yeah.
I think partly, right? Scale, the scale of a landfill.
No,
And
I'm
it
not
has a
sure.
lot of things that are not aerobic.
I think
it's
it-
mixed with all these other things.
They want an anaerobic environment. I mean, that's, yeah. They don't want movement of materials. They want it, what goes in there, they want to keep in there. So, thank you, sorry.
That's okay. No, it's a good question. So this is the food waste audit, and I brought a bunch of copies in case anybody wants to take one home. It's really most effective if everybody in the household understands why you're doing it and takes part in it. I put it on the refrigerator with a pen, so anybody who throws food away can do that. And part of the benefit is that they start to think about why they're throwing away half a can of soda, which I don't have in my house, but for example. Or they realize what they bought on impulse that they didn't eat after all. So the next step after you do the audit is to sit down and do an assessment of the food that you threw away and figure out why. So when I put food here, I sometimes also say rotted, nobody liked it, or whatever the reason was that it didn't get eaten. And then that helps us make choices about what we buy and how we fix it. So there are a couple of things to do once you know how much you're wasting, and I have some tips from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection for reducing the amount of food that you waste. And the first one is to shop smarter and more realistically, and that involves planning ahead. Everything involves planning ahead, basically, but so you write a list based on maybe what you think you're going to fix throughout the week. I'm not all that good about that because I like to go to the store and see what's fresh in the organic section. But if you've done it often enough, then you start to think, yeah, so if I buy these beets, well, that's not a very good example. If I buy this broccoli and we don't eat it all the first night, what am I going to do with what's left? Oh, I can put it in that quinoa with broccoli casserole or whatever. But you need to start thinking more strategically when you shop. And when all that planning falls apart, and it always does, there are still ways to use food that sits in the crisper a little bit too long. My favorite cookbook for that is called Perfectly Good Food. They mentioned a cookbook in here, or maybe they didn't mention the cookbook, but the James Beard Foundation, which has put on these food waste programs across the country, has a cookbook called Waste Not. And I bought it, and I felt like for every recipe in there that was saving my carrot tops, I had to go to the store and buy 3 more ingredients. And that really wasn't, because they're chefs. They're doing fancy things. I just wanted good food. And then my sister gave me this, and this is really the kind of zero waste cooking that I want to do. I think we get a little bit enamored of another kind of zero waste cooking, which is like use the root and the top of the carrots and something else. If you can do that, that's fine. But what really seems to me we need to be doing is just not buying things we're not going to eat, making sure we eat leftovers. In fact, they recommend having 1 or 2 nights a week that are designated leftover nights. If you don't have leftovers, that's great, but if you do, you eat them. And then not buying something that it turns out nobody likes. The other thing that they suggest is storing food in the right places in the proper way. And for me, that means not letting things get pushed to the back of the refrigerator and where you find them 2 months later in what my mother called science experiments. And she always wanted us to take them to school, say, look what grew on this. But that's also sometimes easier said than done. Not so hard in the freezer, but all those little jars and things that sort of slip to the back, half a can of coconut milk or a jar of some Asian spice that you bought for this, and when you don't find it, you buy another one, and suddenly you have 3 jars of hoisin sauce in your refrigerator. So if you have a system, like I finally decided, okay, all the Asian condiments go in the door of the refrigerator there. And if they don't fit there, then I'm not allowed to buy them until I use up what's there. I think they had one more suggestion, which was treat the expiration dates and sell-by dates as suggestions. There's only one food that's actually regulated as far as when it's used, and that's baby formula in this country. Everything else is set by the manufacturers because they want you to use food when it looks the best and maybe has the best texture or most eye appeal or whatever. But most food can be eaten, if it's pantry food, it can be eaten well past the expiration date. I don't recommend intentionally keeping things well past the expiration date, but don't throw something away because the expiration date says that we should have used it 2 days ago. A lot of food that gets thrown away in this country is thrown away for that very reason. So think about doing a food waste audit, and if you do, I would love to hear how it went. I meant to do one this week before I came so I could show you my results, but the week just got too crazy. Or I thought I was throwing away too much food and I didn't want to share that information. I can't remember. Once we succeed in at least assessing how much food we're wasting and maybe start making a plan to waste less food in our homes, there is another thing that we can do, and that goes back to the advocacy and policy work that I was talking about before. There are policies that we could put in place in our communities, in our states, and regionally that would help us waste less food. And one of those is composting, making composting available to everybody. So we have another video from NPR, which is about a program in Denver that I wanted to show you.
With more people staying at home during the pandemic, residential food waste has spiked in some parts of the country. Even before the crisis, 40% of food never made it to people's plates. And once it did, $281 billion of it a year was thrown away. Tonight, we take a look at one city's effort to aggressively tackle food waste, an effort they're betting will help them feed more residents in need and lower greenhouse gases. Special correspondent Allison Aubrey has the story. It's part of a 5-part NewsHour series, Waste Not, Want Not, which was reported on before the COVID-19 outbreak.
All right, so we're going to be talking some trash today.
It's the City of Denver's Waste Extravaganza bus tour, and Megan Lane, an administrator in the city's recycling program, is showing a busload of neighborhood leaders where their trash ends up. First stop, one of Denver's biggest landfills.
When we dig through trash, what we find is 25% of the material is recyclable and 50% of the material is compostable, which is a whole heck of a lot of material. So easily, right, we should be diverting 75%.
Lane explains that a good chunk of our trash is made up of food waste that could be composted. Denver offers curbside compost pickup for its food waste to try to keep it out of its landfills, but participation in the program is low, with less than 13% of eligible homes signed up. So much of Denver's food waste is still ending up in a landfill. Next stop on the tour, Denver's 430-acre compost facility outside the city. Residents get a lesson in what can and can't be composted.
The opportunity for having an impact on the environment is huge.
The city is hoping that more people realize that a good percentage of their trash can be composted, so they sign up for Denver's curbside compost pickup. Charlotte Pitt directs the city's composting program.
Composting is basically taking your food scraps and turning them into a valuable soil amendment. When you put organic material into a landfill, it produces methane because it doesn't have the light and the water and the oxygen that it needs to decompose properly. So keeping it out of the landfill is huge.
It's huge because methane is a powerful greenhouse gas that contributes to climate change. It's 28 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Composting food waste uses water and oxygen and only emits small amounts of carbon dioxide. so its impact on greenhouse gases is much lower. Nationwide, Americans generate around 40 million tons of food waste each year, but only 6% of that ends up being composted. This Denver family has been composting ever since Denver's compost pickup program started back in 2006.
After we started composting everything that could be composted, we saw about a 50% reduction in the amount of trash that we had. So then I ordered a smaller trash bin and, of course, a bigger composting bin.
In Denver, chefs are joining the battle against food waste with an initiative called the Chef's Challenge. The city appoints a handful of chefs to try out composting and reduce food waste in their own kitchens. Jason Burgett is chef owner of a restaurant called The Wooden Spoon.
It was eye-opening. 63% of our food waste was compostable. This small little place produces so much compost.
It's all part of an effort to green up what is already a pretty eco-conscious city. Lots of people here in Denver ride bikes and support renewable energy. Now there's an effort to show them that reducing food waste and composting are two of the top ways to really make a difference. The effort is getting a jump start from the Natural Resources Defense Council, a national nonprofit that focuses on environmental issues. They're infusing local organizations that focus on food waste with funds to bolster their efforts. Denver is one of 3 pilot programs the NRDC has launched in cities across the country. Nashville and Baltimore are also included. In Denver, the NRDC went as far as funding and staffing a new city government position called the Food Waste and Recovery Program Administrator. Leslie Basins is filling that role.
We're focusing on cities because cities are more nimble. At the federal level, the U.S. does have an overall food waste reduction goal of reducing food waste, but I do think that at the local level is where the change is really happening.
A study the NRDC presented Denver back in 2017 shows how cities that aggressively attack food waste can dramatically shrink unmet food needs, or what's called food gaps, for residents who struggle to put food on the table. By increasing the recovery of the edible food that is normally tossed, the report shows Denver potentially capturing an additional 7 million meals and cutting its food gap in half. Arlen Preblood started We Don't Waste, one of Colorado's largest food recovery organizations. He says having a national organization like the NRDC has not only brought more resources to the issue of food waste, it raises the level of awareness in the community about its connection to both hunger and greenhouse gases.
It has provided us with a platform to enhance what we do for the community. And through their efforts, they're asking organizations like We Don't Waste and others to reach further into the community and develop programs that bring food deeper into the communities so those folks that are less fortunate are overcoming food insecurity.
Amid the COVID-19 pandemic, Preblood says demand for their services has nearly tripled.
So when a city takes on food waste, there's a whole chain reaction that happens. Environmentally, if you waste less food, you have a benefit in terms of greenhouse gas emission, which benefits cities who often have these greenhouse gas reduction goals. Then you also will feed more people. And I think in a lot of cities that are struggling with food insecurity, being able to rescue more food is a huge bonus.
Attacking food waste effectively requires a 2-pronged approach, according to Basins. There's recovery of the edible food that's being tossed and recycling or composting the food that normally ends up in a landfill. But increasing composting could be difficult. Part of the reason, it costs $10 a month for compost pickup, but trash pickup is lumped into city taxes and perceived to be free by most residents.
We're looking to change that model in the future. Right now, we do have to charge a fee, but that's not our ultimate goal because we really want to incentivize people to participate.
And there are other economics at play, too. Colorado has low tipping fees to dump trash because there's plenty of space for landfills, whereas in Seattle, Washington, composting is mandated and costs less than trash pickup. partly because land and landfills are scarcer, and tipping fees to dump trash are much higher, about $70 a ton compared to less than $20 a ton in Denver. Despite this challenge, Pitt says she remains optimistic.
Whenever you work on behavior change, it just takes some time. The fact that we're over 21,000 people who have taken the time to call us, decide that they're going to pay for the service, we think that's pretty good progress.
Denver is one of a handful of large cities in the U.S. that offers curbside composting, but it's initiatives like this that show other communities how it can be done.
So, I always like to end with this one because it takes us one step further than just doing something in our own homes. It shows us that there's also room for us to do something in the community, like getting community composting started, and hopefully not for a fee. I belong to a group in Medford called the Green Team Auxiliary, and we're not officially appointed, but we're people who want to do something about the local environment, and we aren't going to wait until somebody appoints us to the official Green Team. So we support the Green Team, and one of the things we're looking at right now is trying to bring composting to Medford. It's not a straightforward process, and we're still in the research phase. But that's another thing you can think about when you are looking for things to do for the environment. I mentioned Rebecca Solnit earlier. She wrote a book called Not Too Late. And the point of the book is we know what we need to do. We have the solutions. It's really a question of committing ourselves to following through with those solutions. And as she said in an interview recently, if everybody who was worried about climate change became engaged, became willing to be part of the solution, we wouldn't need to convince the deniers. We would have enough people working on this so that we could stop the worst effects of climate change. So I encourage you to think of yourselves as part of the solution, and I'm hoping that in the next issue of the Eco-Justice Collaborative, which I think Shoshana gets, is that correct? Do you get the newsletter that we put out? It comes from PYM.
No, I don't get that.
Equal. You get Befriending Creation, which is the national newsletter from Quaker Earth Care Witness. Well, if one of you signed up for it, it has all sorts of events that you can attend. It has resources, trainings, good news, and every month it has one story about what some Quaker is doing to be a good steward of the environment. This month it happened to be a Quaker. Usually it's somebody in the Philadelphia Yearly Meeting, but this month it was a Quaker from Oregon who is a certified observer at COP, and he's going to be at COP 28 this year, and he has started a virtual forum so that people who can't go to Dubai or Bonn or wherever it will be next can get online and actually attend some of the meetings. But anyway, I recommend that at least one person in the meeting get it, and then you can do with it what you will. I did bring this to show you. This is the book by Dana Gunderson, who was featured in the first NPR episode that we saw. And it isn't just a cookbook. It has all sorts of other suggestions for how you can waste less food, but it does have the avocado chocolate mousse recipe in it if you're interested. And that's really all that I have for you today, unless you have questions.
I was wondering about the labeling of the expiration dates. There was a move to change for legislation to change it from use by to best by or something. There was trying to standardize. Do you know?
I'm sure it's not standardized because I pick things up at the supermarket even today, and some say best by, some say use by, and some say sell by, which is very confusing. At this point, I think, except for baby formula, that everything is up to the manufacturer, what they say and what date they set.
Yeah, I wonder what happened to the legislation.
Was that national or state?
National.
Maybe we should look it up.
Yeah.
If you find something out, let me know and I'll put it in the next newsletter.
Oh, right, yeah, never mind. It's with the farm bill.
Yeah.
Oh, are you working on the Farm Bill?
No, but everything seems to everything that seems to be important to many of the people here seems to have gotten buried under dysfunction in the legislature.
Yeah.
So, but I would have to add for myself another column to your chart, and I am going to take one along, but I would have to add animals. Because we have chickens, we have horses, we have, we just have chickens and horses.
Oh, yeah.
And we have a dog. And we do eat some meat. I have a husband.
Just add it to the compost column. I mean, animals or compost, it's the same difference, really, right?
In a way, secondarily, yeah.
Or we could squeeze it in over here.
Over there, yeah.
I love that idea.
The chickens are wonderful. I mean, most places, even suburban settings, you can have maybe 2 or 3 chickens as long as you don't have a rooster, or there are all kinds of municipal regulations.
Even in Medford now, we can have chickens.
Yeah.
That was a big deal.
And then, as long as you have hens that are of a laying age, you get eggs for years to come, if you eat eggs, which we do. But
so it's a win-win.
It is. It is a win-win.
What shouldn't be put in compost?
Well, it depends on whether we're talking about commercial compost or in your own backyard.
In my own backyard.
No meat products, no dairy. Right. That's pretty much what cannot go in. Some people say not bread either, and I'm not sure why. Something to do with what the grain does in those conditions, whether it molds or creates a fungus, or, did I hear somebody say?
I would guess mold.
Yeah, although I've put moldy things in my compost, it didn't seem to make any difference. But yeah.
There's a cookbook that was put out by the Mennonites about 40 years ago called More for Less. And at that point we were living in Mennonite Central.
That's where that book came from.
Which one?
More for Less.
More for Less.
No, I mean which recipe?
The middle crock pot.
With the lentils in it? Mm-hmm. I was wondering if we could maybe get that recipe, or if I could get that recipe.
I'm happy to share it with you.
It would be a fun thing to put in the newsletter, even a link to it, because one of the sections in the newsletter is based on the 5 action areas in the Climate Change Sprint Report, which is advocacy, education, finance, lowering your carbon footprint, and then what they call mourning loss and instilling hope. I would have said, if I'd written it, mourning loss, finding hope, and instilling courage. But, can't be perfect. But under lowering your carbon footprint, I often have something about eating less meat and dairy, because a recent report said that if we ate half as much meat and dairy as we eat now, and nobody else started eating more, that could cut our emissions by 33% and virtually stop any further deforestation. So a recipe like that, with a little blurb in front of it, would be perfect. Shoshana has my email.
I'll get it for you.
Thank you. Any other
It's a good cookbook.
questions, comments? Yes.
One other thing I thought of was soup. I'm not,
You mean for using leftover?
yeah, too much.
Of course. It's probably the best way to use little bits of things.
Keeps for a while, and you don't have to be limited by a recipe. You can just
Exactly. My sister has a recipe called One of Everything. It's like an apple, an onion, a carrot, a potato, whatever. But why go by a recipe? Almost anything that you have in your fridge.
Leftovers that are going to rot if you don't use them.
Exactly.
Well, in More for Less,
Make a crate, fill it with the leftover something or other.
they have some pithy aphorisms or sayings, and the one is a Haitian proverb, and it said, a full stomach says, this guava has worms. An empty stomach says, let me see.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes,
Actually, I had two questions actually. Firstly, apple and an onion. That's
I know, it's weird, but it's really good. It ends up tasting a little bit, I'm trying to think what the soup is. It's a curry, Senegalese soup. That's what it ends up.
Soups will have apples and onions in them.
Yeah.
So first question, it's possibly a little, I'm not sure if everyone agrees with it, but one of the sayings about the obesity epidemic is it has roots in a lot of people used to say, like, force their kids to eat all the food on the plate, and that kind of, I guess, trained people they had to eat even when they were supposedly full. So I wanted to, again, it might be, not everyone agrees with that and whatnot, but I guess I wanted to ask, do you think that there's like a way to have the two kind of elements balance? I guess it would be just buying less initially.
Put less on
or-
your plate to begin with, maybe?
Yeah.
I think obesity is more complicated than that too, because I think it has a lot to do with how much processed food is available to people that are eating on a low budget.
And if you think about it, like that saying is not so popular now, but it was more like in our parents' time, and
Yeah.
they didn't have the problem that we have now when.
Right.
They weren't wasting food anyway.
They weren't worried about the children today.
What my father used to say, his mother would say to him, remember the starving somebody or other.
Armenians, the starving
That's it,
Armenians.
that's right.
I remember the Biafrans.
Well, you're a generation younger than me.
Yeah, I just wanted to have thoughts on that. The other question was, I would imagine one of the best things to do would be to buy food that will like last as long as possible, as opposed to things that like rot right away.
Well, one way to do that is to buy locally because it's fresher to begin with. When you buy something in the supermarket, it's often been on a truck from California for several days. They get here pretty fast, but still, it's been out of the field for at least 4 days, whereas when I go to the farmer's market near me, they picked it that morning, so it's going to be fresher. And you can also use your freezer. But other than that, I think everybody's solution to not letting food rot is going to be kind of personal. All right. Oh, you're so welcome. It was really a pleasure to be here. And Shoshana and Lisa, I think you have my email, or Amelia does. I do, yeah. So if questions come up or there's anything I can do to help with something, just I'm an email away.
And I can guarantee you that not 1 ounce of this will be wasted.
You're a smart man then.